Friday evening descended on Manhattan with the kind of golden light that made even the construction dust look romantic. Darius Whitmore stood on the scaffold at the new commercial tower in Midtown testing the final panel connection when his foreman's voice cut through the hum of power tools. "Whitmore, you leaving early? That's not like you." The electrical panel clicked into place under his calloused fingers. Darius had spent 6 hours threading conduit through concrete walls, his back aching in that familiar way that meant he'd pushed too hard. But the job was done, and for once he had somewhere to be that wasn't another overtime shift or a parent-teacher conference. "Got an appointment." Marcus from the third-floor crew leaned over the railing, grinning. "A date? Darius Whitmore on a date? Hell must have frozen over and nobody told me." Heat crawled up the back of his neck. 3 years of turning down every setup, every suggestion from well-meaning co-workers who couldn't understand that a man could be content alone with his son. Except content wasn't quite the right word anymore, was it? Just dinner. Nothing special. But his hands betrayed him, checking his phone 3 times in 2 minutes as he packed his tools. The app notification still glowed on the screen, confirmed for 7:00 p.m. Chez Laurent. Sarah L. had been easy to talk to over text these past 2 weeks. Teacher recently divorced, understood the complications of single parenthood. Safe, uncomplicated, exactly what he needed. The drive back to Queens took 40 minutes through rush-hour traffic, giving him too much time to second-guess everything. The radio played something about market volatility and corporate restructuring, words that belonged to a world he'd never touch. He switched to the oldies station. Marvin Gaye understood loneliness better than financial analysts ever could. His apartment building rose up between a bodega and a laundromat, red brick weathered by decades of city grit. Home. He took the stairs 2 at a time to the 3rd floor, keys already in hand. "Daddy!" Ezra launched himself from the couch the moment the door opened, small body colliding with Darius's legs hard enough to make him stagger. 7 years old and already strong, already growing into someone Darius barely recognized some mornings. "Hey, little man, you finish your homework." Dorothy Bradshaw emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel. Silver hair pulled back in the same neat bun she'd worn for the 30 years she'd lived across the hall. Retired teacher, widow, the kind of neighbor who brought soup when Ezra had a cold and never once made Darius feel like he owed her anything. "All done, including the extra credit math problems. This child is too smart for his own good." Ezra bounced on his toes, eyes bright with the kind of excitement that made Darius's chest tighten. "Daddy's going on a date, Mrs. Bradshaw told me." "It's not a big deal, Ez. Just dinner with someone." But Ezra's face had already shifted that too serious expression that sometimes made him look decades older than 7. He stepped closer, voice dropping to something almost conspiratorial. "Are you lonely, Daddy?" The question landed like a punch. Darius knelt, bringing himself eye level with his son, searching for the right words. How did you explain to a child that loneliness wasn't the same as being alone, that you could fill every hour with work and bedtimes and soccer practice and still feel like something vital was missing? "What makes you ask that? Mrs. Bradshaw says grown-ups need grown-up friends too, not just their kids." Dorothy had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "I may have mentioned that fathers deserve lives of their own. Children are resilient when they know they're loved." Darius stood, ruffling Ezra's hair. "I have you, buddy. That's enough." But even as he said it, the words felt hollow. Ezra watched him with those dark, knowing eyes, and Darius wondered what his son saw that he'd been trying so hard to hide. The shower ran hot enough to turn the bathroom into a steam room. Darius stood under the spray, washing away concrete dust and doubt in equal measure. His reflection in the fogged mirror showed a man who looked older than 38. Worry lines carved deep around his eyes. When had that happened? The closet offered limited options. Khakis that still fit from 2 years ago. A button-down shirt in deep blue that Ezra had picked out last Father's Day, insisting it made his eyes sparkly. Nothing fancy but clean and pressed. He didn't own a suit anymore, hadn't since Simone left, and he'd stopped pretending he'd ever need one. "You look nice, Daddy." Ezra sat on the bed legs swinging, watching the preparation ritual, with the intensity of a scientist observing an experiment. His school clothes were already rumpled, a grass stain on one knee from recess, but his smile was pure sunshine. "Thanks, Ez. You going to be good for Mrs. Bradshaw?" "I'm always good." A pause, then quieter. "Will you come back tonight?" The question carried weight that 7-year-olds shouldn't have to carry. Darius sat beside him, pulling him close until Ezra's head rested against his shoulder. "I'll always come back. You know that, right? Nothing and nobody is more important than you. Even if you meet someone nice. Even then, you're my priority, my person, forever." Ezra nodded against his chest, and Darius felt the small body relax. 3 years of proving he wouldn't disappear the way Simone had, and still his son needed the reassurance. Maybe they were both lonely, just in different ways. Dorothy appeared in the doorway, car keys jingling. "I'll drive you. No sense paying for parking in Manhattan." "You don't have to." "Nonsense. It's Friday night and my shows aren't on for another hour. Besides, someone needs to make sure you actually go instead of chickening out at the last minute." She knew him too well. The drive across the Queensboro Bridge felt like crossing into another universe. Manhattan glittered ahead, towers of glass and steel reflecting the dying sunlight, each window a portal into lives Darius would never understand. Somewhere in one of those buildings, people made decisions that moved markets. Down here on street level, he just tried to make sure the lights stayed on. Chez Laurent occupied a corner in Midtown that somehow felt both intimate and intimidating. French bistro, white tablecloths, the kind of place where the prices weren't listed on the menu and everyone spoke in hushed tones. His stomach clenched. "This is the address Sarah gave me." Dorothy squeezed his shoulder. "You're just as good as anyone in there. Remember that." But walking through those doors felt like entering enemy territory. The host, a severe woman in all black, looked him up and down with the kind of assessment that found him wanting before he'd even opened his mouth. "Reservation, Whitmore, 7 o'clock. She checked her book, eyebrow arching. "Table for 2. This way." The dining room hummed with quiet conversation, crystal glasses catching candlelight, creating tiny prisms that danced across white tablecloths. Couples leaned close, sharing secrets. Business types discussed deals over wine that probably cost more than his electric bill. And here he was, a working man in khakis, following a host who walked like she was doing him a favor. His table sat near the window, Manhattan stretching out beyond the glass like a promise or a threat. The host placed a menu in front of him that confirmed his worst fears. No prices, just descriptions in French that might as well have been hieroglyphics. "Your companion will join you shortly. Enjoy your evening." The water glass appeared without him asking, condensation already forming on the crystal. 7 o'clock exactly. Sarah had been clear about the time. Darius pulled out his phone, checking for messages. Nothing. Across the room, another solo diner caught his attention. A woman at a table near the opposite wall, also studying her phone, also waiting. Something about the set of her shoulders spoke of the same tension coiling through his own spine. At least he wasn't the only one sitting alone. 7:15. The restaurant continued to fill around him, empty chairs at his table becoming more conspicuous with each passing minute. Darius opened his messages, typing quickly. "Hey, running late. I'm here at the restaurant." The message showed as delivered but not read. His throat tightened. Meanwhile, across the restaurant, Lillian Ashford had arrived 15 minutes early. A habit formed by years of controlling every variable in her professional life. Elite connections had promised discretion, matching successful professionals who understood the need for privacy. Daniel K. had seemed perfect on paper, finance background, cultured, divorced, no children. Their text exchanges over the past 3 weeks had been pleasant, if somewhat formal. She'd changed clothes 3 times before leaving her office. The black dress was simple Armani, but understated enough to blend. She'd removed her signature pearl necklace, the one that had appeared in too many Forbes photos. Her hair fell loose instead of the severe bun her board preferred. Tonight she was Lil, just Lil, a woman meeting someone for dinner, not the founder of a $2 billion company. The town car had dropped her 2 blocks away, walking those final minutes on heels that cost more than most people's monthly rent. She'd felt the familiar knot of anxiety building. When was the last time she'd done something this normal, this vulnerable? The restaurant host had recognized her immediately. Of course. Lillian saw the flash of recognition quickly masked by professional courtesy. "Ms. Ashford, your table is ready. The reservation is under Lil A." "Of course. This way." Her table offered a view of the kitchen which suited her fine. Watching the controlled chaos of service felt more comfortable than facing the dining room's scrutiny. She ordered water, checked her phone. 7 o'clock. Daniel had confirmed yesterday. 7:15 became 7:20. The water sat untouched, ice melting into expensive crystal. Lillian's finger traced the rim, a nervous habit she usually suppressed in public. Her phone stayed dark. No messages, no explanations. Around her, couples settled into their evening rituals. The businessman, 3 tables over, kept checking his watch, clearly ready to propose based on the nervous energy radiating from his corner. The elderly couple near the window ate in comfortable silence, finishing each other's sentences with a look. Lillian watched them and felt something twist inside her, not quite envy, not quite grief, but some hybrid of both for a life she'd never know. She'd built an empire. Ashford Technologies had revolutionized AI integration in manufacturing, making her a billionaire before 40. She'd given speeches at conferences, graced magazine covers, been named one of the most powerful women in tech. And she ate dinner alone at her desk 9 nights out of 10, laptop open, phone always within reach, the penthouse apartment echoing with her own footsteps. 7:30. The waiter approached with practiced sympathy. "Would you like to order while you wait, miss?" "No, thank you." But her hands betrayed her fingers drumming against the tablecloth in a rhythm that belonged to panic attacks and board meetings gone wrong. She forced them still. Across the room, Darius had reached the same conclusion she was approaching. His phone showed delivered but not read, the modern equivalent of being ignored. He'd checked Sarah's profile one more time, looking for clues. Everything seemed legitimate. Everything except the fact that she wasn't here and wasn't answering. The couples around him seemed to multiply, happiness compounding his isolation. A young pair near the bar couldn't keep their hands off each other. An older set near the window moved with the synchronized grace of decades together. And here he sat, a man who'd convinced himself that trying again might be worth the risk, learning the same lesson he'd learned 3 years ago. Some people just leave. 7:40. The restaurant hummed with life and conversation, the soundtrack to 2 separate failures happening in real time. Darius caught the waiter's eye, ready to ask for the check and end this humiliation. But movement at the neighboring table stopped him. The woman he'd noticed earlier stood abruptly, smoothing her dress with movements that spoke of someone fighting for composure. She was beautiful in a way that belonged to this restaurant, to this city, polished and poised and probably way out of his league. But her eyes, when they swept the room, carried the same hurt he felt clawing at his own chest. She met his gaze for just a second. Recognition flashed between them, not of each other, but of shared experience. 2 people who'd convinced themselves to be vulnerable only to have that vulnerability thrown back in their faces. Lillian saw the man at the next table clock her distress. He looked away quickly, respectful of her space. But not before she'd catalogued everything: the ill-fitting khakis, the hopeful button-down shirt, the phone clutched in hands that had seen hard work. Another person sitting alone. Another person waiting for someone who wasn't coming. The realization should have made her feel better. Misery loves company after all. Instead, it made everything worse. How many people came to places like this hoping for connection, only to find empty chairs and unanswered messages? She sat back down. Not because she had any hope Daniel would show, but because walking out felt like admitting defeat, and Lillian Ashford didn't admit defeat. She'd outlasted hostile takeover attempts and board rebellions. She could outlast one disappointing Friday night. 7:45. Darius made a decision that surprised him as much as anything that had happened in the past hour. He leaned slightly toward the woman's table, keeping his voice low, not wanting to intrude but unable to sit in silence anymore. "Your blind date didn't show up either." The words hung in the air between them, a confession and an invitation rolled into one simple question. He expected her to ignore him, to shut him down with the kind of cold politeness that people used in places like this. Instead, her eyes met his fully for the first time, and he saw something there that knocked the breath from his lungs. Understanding. Real, unvarnished understanding. Apparently not. Her voice carried the weight of someone used to being listened to, but underneath it ran a current of vulnerability that matched his own. She offered a small smile, reluctant but genuine, and Darius felt something shift beneath his ribs. "First time?" She considered the question, head tilting slightly. "First blind date. First date in 3 years." The admission came easier than expected. "My son's babysitter offered to watch him tonight. I figured, why not try?" Interest sparked in her eyes, chasing away some of the hurt. "How old?" Darius's entire posture changed the way it always did when someone asked about Ezra. His face softened, tension bleeding from his shoulders. 7. Ezra. He told me I needed to make grown-up friends. Can you believe a 7-year-old said that? Her laugh surprised them both. Not a polite social laugh, but something real that lit up her features and made her look younger, more approachable. "Smart kid." She paused, then asked quietly, "What made you finally say yes?" The question cut deeper than she probably intended. Darius set his phone down, giving her his full attention. "He asked if I was lonely. I couldn't answer him." The confession sat between them, honest and raw. Lillian felt it settle in her own chest, a mirror of questions she'd been avoiding for years. When was the last time someone had asked if she was lonely? When was the last time she'd been brave enough to answer? The waiter appeared at Darius's elbow, professional mask in place. Sir, if you're not expecting your party, what if we both ordered?" The words tumbled out before Darius could think them through. He looked at the woman, heart suddenly racing. "Not together, but since we're both here and both alone." Lillian calculated risks the way she always did. Unknown man, unknown intentions. Every professional instinct screamed at her to decline, to maintain boundaries, to protect herself. But those same instincts had left her eating alone at her desk for years, building walls so high nobody could climb them. And this man, with his kind eyes and honest admission about his son, felt less like a threat, and more like someone who understood exactly what this kind of loneliness tasted like. "Rules first," Darius blinked. "Rules. No last names, no job titles, no talk about what we do or where we live. Just this moment." He considered understanding dawning in his expression. She was protecting something too. They both were. "Deal. I'm Darius." She extended her hand across the space between their tables. Formal gesture made intimate by context. "Lillian." His hand was warm, calloused in a way that spoke of real work, not gym memberships. Her grip was firm, businesslike, despite the tremor she couldn't quite hide. The contact lasted only seconds, but both of them felt it, connection, tentative and fragile, but real. They didn't combine tables. The symbolism felt important, maintaining separate spaces while building a bridge between them. Both ordered coffee, neither planning to drink it. The restaurant continued around them, couples and conversations, creating a backdrop to something neither of them had anticipated when they'd walked through those doors. "So why did you agree to a blind date?" Darius asked, then quickly added, "You don't seem like someone who does things randomly." Lillian felt exposed, seen in a way that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. What makes you say that? The way you calculated before agreeing to talk, the rules you're used to having control. She should have been offended. Instead, she found herself impressed. Most people only saw the surface, the polished exterior, the confident stride, the woman who had it all together. This man, this stranger, had looked deeper in 5 minutes than people she'd known for years. I wanted to see if I could just be someone, without all the other things attached. What other things? Expectations. People see what I can give them before they see me. The words tasted like truth, bitter and freeing at the same time. She'd never said that out loud before, not even to herself in the privacy of her own apartment at 3 in the morning when the panic attacks hit hardest. Darius nodded slowly, no judgment in his expression. I get that. Different reasons maybe, but I know what it's like to feel like people only see one part of you. What part do they see? He shifted in his seat, considering. The dad part, Ezra's dad. I'm the guy at school pickup, the one who leaves work early for soccer practice, sometimes the only black dad in a line of SUVs. And that's fine, I love being his dad, but sometimes I forget there used to be other parts of me too. Lillian understood that better than she wanted to admit. She'd become Ashford Technologies somewhere along the way, losing Lillian Ashford in the process. When was the last time she'd done something just because it made her happy? When was the last time happiness had even factored into her decisions? Your wife. She stopped herself. Sorry, that's too personal. Ex-wife, Simone. He said the name carefully, like testing its weight after years of silence. She left when Ezra was 4. Said motherhood wasn't what she thought it would be. No bitterness colored his voice, just tired acceptance. Lillian recognized the tone. It was the same one she used when talking about her own failed marriage. The one that had ended when her husband couldn't handle coming second to her company. That must have been difficult. I don't blame her for leaving. I blame her for not figuring it out before we had a kid. He looked down at his coffee. Now I'm both parents. And I thought I was doing okay, but then Ezra asked if I'm lonely and I realized I don't even know anymore. The vulnerability in that admission made Lillian's throat ache. Here was a man who'd built his entire life around caring for someone else, who'd sacrificed whatever dreams he'd had to be present for his son, and he couldn't even name his own loneliness. I don't have kids, her turn to confess. I thought about it years ago, but the timing was never right, and then I got busy and years kept passing. Her voice cracked slightly on the last words. She cleared her throat, but Darius had already heard it, already seen the grief she usually kept locked behind boardroom confidence. Now I'm not sure if I even want that anymore, or if I just convince myself I don't because it's easier. What do you want? The question was simple, but it detonated something in Lillian's carefully constructed defenses. When was the last time someone had asked her what she wanted, not what the board needed, not what the shareholders expected, not what would maximize returns, just what did Lillian want tonight? She met his eyes, finding safety in their warmth. I just want to talk to someone who sees me as a person, not a resource. You're doing it now. She blinked. What? Sitting across from someone. Talking. No agenda. Just this. The words hit with the force of revelation. He was right. This simple act, sitting in a restaurant having a conversation with someone who wanted nothing from her except her company, felt revolutionary, dangerous, essential. Time moved differently after that. Conversations flowed like water, finding new channels, neither forced nor careful. Darius told her about Ezra's first day of school, how he'd cried more than his son had, standing in the hallway long after the teacher had closed the door. Lillian shared stories about her early startup days, the terror and exhilaration of betting everything on an idea that might fail. What made you keep going? Darius asked. When it got hard? Pride mostly, stubbornness. I'd burned too many bridges to turn back. She smiled, but it carried an edge. And somewhere along the way, proving everyone wrong became more important than being happy. Are you happy? 9 o'clock now. The restaurant had begun to empty, couples drifting toward whatever came next in their evenings. Lillian's coffee had gone cold hours ago. She picked up the cup anyway, staring into the dark liquid like it held answers. I eat dinner alone almost every night, at my desk. Laptop open, phone within reach. I tell myself it's productive, but the truth is, she set the cup down carefully. I don't know how to do it any other way anymore. Darius heard the admission underneath the words, saw the loneliness she'd spent years hiding from everyone, including herself. He understood it because he lived it too, just in a different apartment in a different borough, eating standing up while helping with homework, filling the silence with his son's voice. Because without it, the emptiness would be unbearable. "Do you ever resent it?" Lillian asked quietly. "Being alone, every day. Honest words, no padding. But I built this life. I chose to stay when Simone left. Chose Ezra over dating, over social life, over me. And I don't regret it, but sometimes I wake up and don't remember who I was before I became someone's entire world." Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of two people who'd found something unexpected in each other's truth, who'd stumbled into understanding without meaning to. "I'm glad you were here tonight." Lillian's voice was soft but certain. "Even if neither of us were supposed to be." Maybe we were supposed to be. Darius met her eyes, feeling brave in a way he hadn't felt since before Simone left. Just not for the people we thought. The moment stretched, fragile and perfect. Then Darius's phone vibrated against the table, shattering their bubble. He glanced at the screen and his entire posture shifted. "I'm sorry, I need to take this." He stood, stepping away from the table, but not before Lillian saw the name on the screen, Mrs. Bradshaw. The worry that flashed across his face told her everything, something about his son. She watched him pace near the restaurant entrance, phone pressed to his ear. Body language screaming parental concern. Whatever carefree moment they'd been building evaporated in the face of real-world responsibility. She knew even before he came back to the table that their evening was over. Darius returned apology written in every line of his body. "I have to go. Ezra woke up from a nightmare. He's asking for me." "Of course, go." But he didn't move immediately. He stood there looking at her like he was trying to memorize her face, trying to hold on to something he'd found and now had to leave behind. "I didn't want this to end like this." Lillian felt her armor sliding back into place, protective walls rising to shield against the disappointment that came from opening up too soon, trusting too easily. Her smile felt brittle even to herself. "Nothing lasts, right?" Something in his expression shifted. Not acceptance, but determination. He pulled out his phone, unlocking it with quick, certain movements, then held it out to her. "I don't know if this breaks your rules, but I'd like to see you again." The contact screen glowed between them, cursor blinking in the name field. Every rational part of Lillian's brain screamed at her to decline, to walk away clean, to keep this as one perfect evening that would never disappoint her by becoming complicated. But she thought about her penthouse, about laptop dinners and empty rooms, and years of convincing herself that isolation was the same thing as independence. Her fingers moved before her mind could overrule them. She typed Lillian, no last name, maintaining the barrier even as she broke it. He smiled, quick and relieved, then typed into his own phone. "So you have mine too." His text came through seconds later. "Thank you for tonight. It meant more than you know." Then he was gone, leaving behind the check he'd already paid and Lillian sitting alone at a table for two. The restaurant felt larger, suddenly emptier. She gathered her coat, her phone, the remnants of her courage, and stepped out into the Manhattan night. The walk home took longer than necessary, 30 blocks, heels clicking against pavement, the city alive around her with Friday night energy. Groups spilled out of bars, couples hailed cabs. The whole complicated machinery of urban life churning forward while she moved through it like a ghost. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She looked down, pulse quickening. "I hope you got home safe, D." She stopped on the corner of Fifth Avenue, watching traffic lights cycle through their colors, and felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Hope. The kind that could hurt you if you let it. "Still walking?" Tonight was unexpected. She hesitated, then added, "In a good way." His response came quickly. "Unexpected is good. I could use more of that. Lillian found herself smiling at her phone screen like a teenager, like someone who hadn't spent the last decade building emotional fortifications. She started walking again, fingers flying over the keyboard. How's Ezra already back asleep? Bad dream about monsters? I told him Daddy would always protect him. A pause, then. He asked if the lady from dinner was nice. I told him yes. Something squeezed in Lillian's chest, something that felt dangerously close to longing. This man had told his 7-year-old about her, had integrated her, however briefly, into the sacred space of his relationship with his son. You told him about me. He's 7. He asks about everything. I don't lie to him. What did you say? That I met someone nice who had also been stood up? That we talked? That it was really good? Lillian stopped walking altogether, standing still while the city moved around her. Her penthouse building rose ahead, doorman visible through the glass entrance, waiting to welcome her back to climate-controlled silence and floor-to-ceiling windows. That made her feel smaller instead of larger. Was it really good? His response took longer this time, like he was choosing his words carefully. Best night I've had in 3 years. The confession settled in her stomach, warm and terrifying. She looked up at her building, at all 37 floors of it, and knew with sudden clarity that she didn't want to go up there. Not yet. Not when she was still feeling human for the first time in months. Can I ask you something? Her fingers shook slightly as she typed. Do you think people like us can actually do this, build something real when our lives are so different? She sent it before she could second-guess, before she could remember all the reasons why successful CEOs didn't text with electricians at 10 at night, before she could rebuild the walls that Darius had somehow slipped beneath without even trying. I don't know how different they are. You eat alone. I eat alone. You're lonely. I'm lonely. Seems pretty similar to me. The simplicity of it made her throat tight. He was right, of course. Strip away the money and the power and the responsibilities, and they were just two people who'd forgotten how to connect, who'd built lives around everything except living. But there are things you don't know about me, things that might change how you see me. The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Whatever he was typing kept getting deleted, rewritten. Finally, then tell me. Tomorrow. Same restaurant. 7 users. Lillian stared at the words, feeling the weight of decision pressing down. Tomorrow meant making a choice. Tomorrow meant deciding if this thing between them was worth risking the comfortable numbness she'd spent years perfecting. She looked at her building again, then at her phone, then at the city stretched out around her in all its complicated glory. Somewhere in Queens, a man was probably tucking his son back into bed, smoothing the covers, checking the nightlight. Somewhere in this same city that held 8 million people, someone had actually seen her. Okay, but this time it's a real date, not 2 people who got stood up. Deal. I'll actually put on my nice shirt. She smiled despite herself, despite everything. You're already wearing your nice shirt, aren't you? How did you know? Lucky guess. They said goodnight after that, both reluctant to end the conversation but knowing it had to end somewhere. Lillian rode the elevator to her penthouse, let herself into rooms that cost more per month than most people earned in a year, and found them exactly as empty as they'd always been. She stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at Manhattan spread beneath her like a promise. Her phone rested in her hand. Darius's last message still glowing on the screen. Tomorrow she would have to tell him the truth. Tomorrow he would Google her name and find out exactly who Lillian really was. Tomorrow everything might fall apart. But tonight, for just a few more hours, she could be someone who'd had a good conversation with a kind man. Someone who'd laughed genuinely and admitted vulnerability and felt seen. Somewhere in the city, Darius was doing the same calculation. Lying in bed after checking on Ezra one more time, phone on the nightstand, replaying every moment of the evening. He didn't know Lillian's last name, didn't know what she did for a living. Didn't know anything except that she'd looked at him like he mattered. Like his words had weight, like he was more than just Ezra's dad or the electrician or the black guy who didn't quite fit in restaurants like Chez Laurent. Tomorrow he would see her again. Tomorrow she would tell him whatever secrets she was keeping. Tomorrow he might find out that people from her world and his world didn't mix no matter how much they wanted to. But tonight, for the first time in 3 years, he'd felt alive. And that had to count for something. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of clarity that made Darius question every decision he'd made the night before. Ezra bounced around the kitchen cereal, spilling over the rim of his bowl as excitement overrode coordination. "Daddy's going on another date with the same lady." Dorothy Bradshaw sat at their small table nursing coffee. Silver eyebrows raised over the rim of her mug. She'd let herself in with the spare key the way she always did on Saturday mornings, bringing fresh bagels and unsolicited life advice in equal measure. She must be special. Darius wiped up the spilled milk, buying himself time before answering. Special felt like an understatement and an overstatement simultaneously. They'd talked for 3 hours, exchanged maybe a dozen texts after. He knew nothing concrete about her except that she understood loneliness in a way most people couldn't articulate. "I don't know what she is, but I want to find out." Ezra grabbed his arm's sticky fingers, leaving prints on his sleeve. "Can I meet her, please? Mrs. Bradshaw says you shouldn't hide people who make you smile." Did Mrs. Bradshaw say a lot of things? The older woman had the grace to look slightly sheepish. "I may have mentioned that healthy relationships require transparency and integration into existing family structures." "She means we should all be friends," Ezra translated with 7-year-old certainty. The afternoon stretched ahead with too many hours to fill before 7 o'clock. Darius cleaned the apartment twice, reorganizing Lego sets that were already organized, wiping down surfaces that were already clean. His reflection in the bathroom mirror showed someone trying too hard, worry lines etched deeper than yesterday. The blue button-down hung on the back of his bedroom door, the one Ezra insisted made his eyes sparkly. Darius pulled it on, smoothed the fabric, then changed into a different shirt, then back to the blue one. He was still debating when Ezra appeared in the doorway. "That one, Daddy. Definitely that one." "You sure? Miss Lillian liked it last time. She kept looking at you." Heat crawled up the back of his neck. 7-year-olds noticed too much. Across the river, Lillian stood in her walk-in closet, staring at options that all felt wrong. The emergency board email had arrived at 6 a.m., meeting Monday 9 a.m. Gregory Vaughn presenting restructuring proposal. Mandatory attendance. She knew what that meant. Gregory had been circling for months, looking for weakness, waiting for an opening to make his move. The CFO position had never been enough for him. He wanted her chair, her company, her legacy. And she'd given him ammunition by disappearing on a Friday night to have dinner with a stranger. Rebecca's voice echoed in her memory. "When was the last time you put yourself first?" The black dress from yesterday lay crumpled on the floor, evidence of the previous night's uncharacteristic spontaneity. She should cancel. Send a polite text to Darius, claim work emergency, retreat back into the safety of isolation and quarterly reports. Instead, she pulled out jeans, real jeans, not the designer denim that cost 4 figures, and a cashmere sweater that whispered luxury but didn't scream it. Her reflection looked different somehow. Softer, more nervous. She couldn't remember the last time nerves had factored into any equation. The subway ride to Midtown felt like traveling backward through time. She hadn't taken public transit in years, preferred town cars and drivers who knew to keep the partition closed. But walking into Chez Laurent tonight needed to feel earned, not delivered. The car lurched through tunnels while tourists and workers pressed close, everyone existing in their own urgent bubble. No one recognized her. No one looked twice. Darius arrived at 6:45, early enough to feel pathetic, late enough to not look desperate. The same host from yesterday assessed him with marginally less disdain. Possibly because he'd prepaid for dinner this time, possibly because repeat customers earned a modicum of respect. "Mr. Whitmore, your table is ready." Not near the window this time. Center of the room, impossible to hide exactly what he'd requested. If they were doing this, whatever this was then hiding felt counterproductive. 7 o'clock arrived with Lillian walking through the door, scanning the room until her eyes found his. Relief and nervousness warred across her features before settling into something that might have been joy. She moved toward him with the confidence of someone used to commanding rooms, but her hands twisted together at her waist, betraying uncertainty underneath. He stood. She smiled. Neither quite knew what greeting fit this moment. Hug felt presumptuous, handshake felt ridiculous, so they settled for an awkward half-wave that made them both laugh. Hi. Hi. She slid into the chair across from him, and the symbolism wasn't lost on either of them. Same table. Together. No more separate islands of isolation pretending connection. Conversation flowed easier this time, lubricated by yesterday's vulnerability. Darius told her about Ezra's soccer game that morning, how his son had scored the winning goal and then cried because the other team looked sad. Lillian found herself laughing genuinely, imagining a 7-year-old with that kind of empathy. He sounds wonderful. He's everything. Simple words that carried the weight of Darius's entire world. They ordered food this time, not just coffee. Shared appetizers arrived and they traded bites without thinking, the intimacy of the gesture sneaking past both their defenses. He noticed she was left-handed. She noticed he checked his phone reflexively every few minutes, parent reflex impossible to suppress. Tell me something true about you. His voice dropped lower, inviting secrets. Something you don't usually tell people. Lillian set down her fork, considering the question's weight. Every instinct screamed at her to deflect, to offer something surface level that sounded vulnerable without actually risking anything. But his eyes held hers with such genuine interest that lying felt like betrayal. I have panic attacks sometimes, usually at night when I'm alone. I've never told anyone that before. No judgment crossed his features, no uncomfortable shifting or changing the subject. He just nodded, absorbing the information like it mattered, like she mattered beyond this single confession. What triggers them? The thought that I've built this whole life and none of it belongs to anyone. Like I could vanish and only the quarterly reports would notice the difference. The admission hung between them, more honest than she'd been with herself in years. Darius reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. You wouldn't disappear, I'd notice. Something in her chest cracked open, some carefully constructed wall developing fissures. They'd known each other less than 24 hours. They'd shared maybe 4 hours of actual conversation. And somehow this stranger saw her more clearly than people who'd known her for years. Isaiah asked me last week if I'm sad. His turn to confess. I told him no, but the truth is I've been sad for 3 years. Not every day, but enough that my 7-year-old can see it. Lillian's hand moved of its own accord, closing the final inches to rest on top of his. His fingers were warm, slightly rough from work, solid in a way that made her feel less like she was floating untethered through space. That must be exhausting, being everything for him. Sometimes, not often. But yeah, sometimes I wake up and don't remember who I was before I became someone's entire world. Then I feel guilty for even thinking that, because he didn't ask for any of this. He just deserves a parent who shows up. The rawness in his voice made her throat ache. She understood that particular flavor of sacrifice, the way you could give everything to one thing and wake up one day realizing you'd somehow lost yourself in the process. I don't have kids. I thought about it years ago, but the timing was never right. And then I got busy and years kept passing, and now I'm not sure if I even want that anymore, or if I just convinced myself I don't because it's easier. The restaurant hummed around them, couples and conversations creating white noise that faded into background irrelevance. 4 hours dissolved into nothing, marked only by the arrival and departure of plates neither of them remembered ordering. 11 o'clock found them standing on the sidewalk outside, neither quite ready for the evening to end. Darius made a decision that felt both brave and foolish. Can I walk you home, or at least to your subway? She lied with practiced ease. I'm just a few blocks away. Truth lived 30 blocks north in a penthouse she had no intention of revealing tonight. But walking felt necessary, like their conversation needed the rhythm of footsteps to continue properly. Manhattan on Saturday night pulsed with different energy than Friday. Groups spilled from clubs, laughter echoing off glass and steel. Street musicians occupied corners, guitar cases open for donations. They walked slowly, neither setting the pace, just existing in parallel motion. A violinist near Washington Square Park played something classical and melancholy, bow moving with precision born from years of practice. Darius stopped, captivated by the music. He pulled out his wallet, dropping a $5 bill into the case. Lillian added a 20 without thinking, then caught him noticing. "The acoustics here are good," she offered lamely. He didn't comment on the casual way she'd added money that probably meant nothing to her, or the fact that his 5 was carefully calculated from a limited budget. They just stood together listening, letting the music say things they couldn't articulate themselves. The park at night held pockets of darkness between pools of lamplight. They found a bench away from foot traffic, sitting close enough that their shoulders brushed. The city stretched around them in all directions, 8 million people pursuing their own private desperations and joys. "What made you keep going?" His question came quietly, continuing a thread from dinner. "When building your career got hard, pride mostly, stubbornness, I'd burned too many bridges to turn back." Her smile carried edges sharp enough to cut, and somewhere along the way, proving everyone wrong became more important than being happy. "Are you happy?" The question landed like a stone in still water ripples spreading outward. Lillian looked at the trees overhead, their branches creating shadows that moved with the breeze, and tried to remember the last time she'd asked herself that question honestly. "I eat dinner alone almost every night, at my desk, laptop open, phone within reach. I tell myself it's productive, but the truth is—" She stopped, swallowed hard. "I don't know how to do it any other way anymore." Darius heard all the words she wasn't saying, the confession underneath the confession. He understood it because he lived parallel existence, just in different zip code, filling silence with different noise, numbing loneliness with different routines. "Do you ever resent it being alone?" "Every day. But I built this life. I chose my career over relationships, over family, over everything else. And I don't regret the success, but sometimes I wonder if success was supposed to feel this hollow." They sat with that truth for a while, neither trying to fix it or dismiss it. Just acknowledging that loneliness came in many forms, wore many faces, destroyed people slowly from the inside, regardless of their bank balances. "I really want to kiss you right now." The words escaped before Darius could question their wisdom. Lillian turned to face him fully, eyes searching his for something she must have found, because her answer came without hesitation. "Why don't you?" He leaned in slowly, giving her time to change her mind, to remember all the reasons this was complicated. But she met him halfway, lips touching his with a gentleness that felt like question and answer simultaneously. The kiss deepened naturally, years of isolation and hunger pouring into connection that neither had expected to find. They broke apart, foreheads resting together, breathing hard. The city continued around them, indifferent to small moments of human connection happening on park benches. "I want you to meet Ezra tomorrow. Is that too fast?" Lillian's heart hammered against her ribs. Meeting his son meant crossing a threshold, meant this wasn't just dinner and conversation anymore. It meant real stakes, real consequences, real possibility of pain when it inevitably fell apart. "No, I want to meet him." They exchanged details, address in Queens, 2 o'clock Sunday afternoon, then stood reluctantly, both knowing the spell would break if they stretched it too far. Darius walked her to the subway entrance, kissed her again quickly, then watched her disappear down the stairs into the underground. He didn't know she circled back up a different exit, hailed a cab north to her actual address. Tipped the driver 50% because she felt drunk on something that had nothing to do with alcohol. The penthouse welcomed her back with its usual silence. But it felt different now. Less like sanctuary, more like cage. Sunday morning found Lillian staring at her closet with rising panic. What did one wear to meet a 7-year-old? She tried 5 different outfits, settling finally on jeans and a simple sweater, then added minimal makeup and pulled her hair into a ponytail. Her reflection showed someone unrecognizable, younger, softer, terrified. The subway to Queens felt like traveling to foreign country. She transferred twice, studied the map obsessively, emerged into neighborhood that bore no resemblance to Manhattan. Buildings here wore their age, honestly brick facades weathered by decades, fire escapes zigzagging down exteriors like metal veins. Children played on sidewalks. Bodegas advertised lottery tickets and money orders. Real life happened here in ways it never did in her temperature-controlled world. Darius's building stood between a laundromat and a corner store, red brick, dark with city grime. She found his apartment number 3B and knocked before courage could desert her entirely. The door opened to reveal Darius, looking softer than she'd seen him, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt that had seen better days. But his smile was pure sunshine, relief and happiness mixing into something that made her stomach flip. "You came. Did you think I wouldn't?" "Wasn't sure. This is a long way from Midtown." She stepped inside, immediately struck by how small the space was. Her penthouse closet was probably larger than his living room. But warmth radiated from every surface, photos on walls, Ezra's drawings covering the refrigerator, Lego sets organized meticulously on shelves. This was what a home actually looked like. A small face peered around Darius's leg. Dark eyes wide with curiosity and shyness in equal measure. Ezra wore dinosaur pajamas despite it being 2 in the afternoon, hair still rumpled from sleep. Lillian knelt down to his eye level, letting him control the distance. "Hi, Ezra. Your dad told me you like Legos." The mention of Legos worked magic. Ezra's face lit up, shyness evaporating. "I built a spaceship. Want to see?" Really?" The tour of his Lego collection took 30 minutes, Ezra narrating each build with detailed explanations of engineering challenges and creative solutions. Lillian found herself genuinely fascinated, her brain automatically calculating stress loads and structural integrity questions that made Ezra's eyes go wider. "You understand Legos? I understand building things, just usually with different materials." They built together while Darius made lunch in the kitchen, the domestic scene so normal it felt radical. Lillian couldn't remember the last time she'd sat on a floor, much less played with toys. But Ezra's enthusiasm was infectious, his unself-conscious joy in creation reminding her why she'd fallen in love with engineering in the first place. Lunch was mac and cheese from a box, carrot sticks, apple slices. The kind of meal she'd never eat, prepared with care and served at a table barely large enough for 3. They squeezed together, elbows touching, and Lillian took her first bite of something Darius had cooked. "This is delicious," Ezra giggled. "It's just craft, but Daddy makes it special." The simplicity of that statement, the uncomplicated love behind it, made her chest ache. This was what family felt like. Not perfect, not polished, just present. Without warning, Ezra set down his fork and looked directly at her. "Are you Daddy's girlfriend?" Both adults froze. Darius recovered first, voice carefully neutral. "We're friends, buddy." But Ezra had 7-year-old logic on his side. "Mrs. Bradshaw saw you kissing her last night from her window. She told me. If you kissed her, she's your girlfriend." Heat flooded Lillian's face. Darius looked mortally embarrassed. "Dorothy Bradshaw, Neighborhood Watch." The absurdity broke the tension. Lillian laughed, real laughter that came from her belly, and suddenly they were all laughing, the awkwardness dissolving into something lighter. "I don't mind if she's your girlfriend." Ezra's pronouncement carried the weight of royal decree. "She's nice, and she knows about Legos." Darius and Lillian exchanged glances over his head, whole conversations happening in silence. They hadn't defined anything yet, hadn't discussed what this was or could be. But Ezra had given his blessing, and somehow that mattered more than any adult negotiation. The afternoon moved to a small park 3 blocks away, playground equipment worn but functional. Ezra ran ahead, boundless energy finding outlet in climbing and swinging. Lillian and Darius sat on a bench watching him play, shoulders touching in a way that felt natural. So, about what Ezra said, is that what we are, boyfriend and girlfriend? Feels very high school. What else would we be? Lillian's stomach tightened. Here was the moment she'd been dreading, the confession that would change everything. Darius, there are things you don't know about me. Things that might change. Then tell me. She took a breath, forcing the words out before fear could stop them. My full name is Lillian Ashford. He waited, clearly expecting more. Lillian Ashford, founder and CEO of Ashford Technologies. Understanding dawned slowly, then all at once. His expression shifted from confusion to recognition, to something that might have been shock or might have been hurt. He stood walking a few steps away, hands shoved in pockets. The AI company, the Fortune 500 company. Yes. Minutes stretched between them, measured by Ezra's laughter on the swings. When Darius finally turned back, his face showed conflict, not anger exactly, but something raw, betrayal adjacent. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you to see me, not what I've built. I told you everything, about Simone leaving, about struggling with bills sometimes, about feeling like I'm barely keeping it together. And you let me. It wasn't fake. Her voice cracked despite efforts to keep it steady. This us is the only real thing I've had in years. But it was built on omission. The accusation landed hard because it was true. She'd let him expose himself while keeping her own armor intact. She'd asked for honesty while hiding behind rules about no last names, no job titles. Ezra chose that moment to run over, oblivious to the tension. Why are you guys sad? Darius knelt immediately, parent mode overriding everything else. We're just talking, Ez. Did you do something bad? Small voice directed at Lillian. She matched his eye level, refusing to hide from the question. I didn't tell your daddy the whole truth about me. Are you still nice? I try to be. Ezra considered this with the gravity of someone much older. Then it's okay. Daddy says everybody makes mistakes. From the mouths of children came wisdom that adults spent years forgetting. Darius stood slowly, looking between his son and the woman who'd somehow become important in less than 48 hours. I need time to think. Lillian nodded, throat too tight for words. But I don't want this to be over, just time. Okay. They parted without touching, Ezra waving enthusiastically as they walked away. Lillian stood in the park, watching them disappear around a corner, feeling the weight of revelation settling into her bones. She'd finally been honest, and it might cost her everything. Monday morning arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. Lillian's phone buzzed at 6 a.m. board meeting, 9 a.m. sharp. No delays. She dressed in her Armor Armani suit, heels that added 3 inches, and psychological advantage hair pulled back severely. Victoria Mitchell, CEO, ready for battle. The woman who'd sat on floors playing Legos yesterday ceased to exist. The boardroom on the 42nd floor overlooked Manhattan with views that cost millions to secure. 8 members sat in leather chairs worth more than most people's cars. Gregory Vaughn occupied the seat directly opposite hers. Silver hair, perfectly styled smile, predatory. Lillian, good of you to join us. She took her position at the head of the table, every inch the leader who'd built this company from nothing. What's this about Gregory Structuring. The company's growth has outpaced our current leadership structure. I'm proposing changes that would better position us for the future. Translation: he wanted her chair. She'd known this was coming, had prepared for every angle of attack, except the one he actually used. Gregory slid a tablet across the table. The screen showed a photo, her and Darius kissing on the park bench Saturday night. The image was grainy, clearly taken from distance, but unmistakably them. Can you explain this? Her blood turned to ice. My personal life is my business, not when you're the face of a $2 billion company. The board has concerns about distractions. Shareholders are nervous. The merger talks with tech giant are stalling because of questions about leadership stability. One photograph doesn't indicate instability. No, but disappearing Friday night, canceling Saturday morning calls, spending Sunday in Queens, it indicates priorities that may no longer align with company needs. The other board members shifted uncomfortably. Some looked away, others studied the photo with interest that made her skin crawl. They'd been watching her, documenting her movements, building a case. "I'm proposing a temporary restructuring." Gregory's voice carried false sympathy. "You transition to chairman role. I assume CEO responsibilities. Just until the merger completes and things stabilize. Temporary. 6 months. Then we reassess." She knew how this worked. Temporary became permanent. Once she stepped down, clawing back power would be impossible. But refusing looked defensive, looked like she had something to hide. Gregory had boxed her in beautifully. "I need time to consider." "Of course. We vote Friday. 5 days should be sufficient." She left the meeting with head high and stomach churning. Her assistant Rebecca waited outside, face pale. "Ms. Ashford, there's a situation. The tabloids picked up the story. It's everywhere." The elevator ride to her office felt eternal. Rebecca showed her phone screen after phone screen. Headlines screamed variations of the same theme. Tech billionaire's secret romance. Ashford CEO slumming with working-class boyfriend love. Across class lines or publicity stunt photos of her and Darius leaving the restaurant. Walking through the park, entering his building in Queens, someone had been following them, documenting everything, building narrative that painted her as either desperate or manipulative depending on which publication you read. Her phone rang. Blocked number, but she answered anyway. "Ms. Ashford, this is Jennifer Craig from The Times. I'm writing a piece about your relationship with Darius Whitmore. Would you care to comment?" She hung up. The phone immediately rang again, different number, same question. She turned it off, feeling walls closing in. Across the river, Darius's morning imploded in parallel disaster. His foreman met him at the job site entrance, tablet in hand. Expression carefully neutral. "Whitmore, need to talk to you." The break room was empty at 7 a.m. His boss showed him the tablet screen, the same photos Lillian had seen, but with different headlines focusing on him. "Electrician lands billionaire CEO. From construction site to penthouse, modern Cinderella story or gold digger alert." "Is this you with Lillian Ashford?" "Yes." "Christ, Darius, you realize she's a billionaire. What are you doing?" "I'm dating someone, that's all." But the whispers followed him onto the floor. Co-workers who'd been friendly yesterday now studied him with mix of envy and suspicion. Marcus from the 3rd floor cornered him at lunch. "So Whitmore, she buy you a new car yet?" "We're just dating." "Right, just dating. Billionaire CEO and electrician. That's a real love story." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means one of you is using the other and I'm not sure which one. Either she's slumming for kicks or you hit the jackpot. Either way, it doesn't end well for the working man." Darius's hands clenched into fists. 3 years of building respect on this site, proving he was reliable and skilled, reduced to gold digger jokes in single morning. His phone buzzed constantly, unknown numbers, texts from people he hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone suddenly interested in his life. He turned it off during afternoon shift, but his boss pulled him aside at 4. "Look, Darius, you're a good worker. But this attention, it's disruptive. I'm putting you on leave pending investigation." "Investigation into what?" "Your relationship with a client's competitor. Conflict of interest protocols. This building isn't even related to her company. Just go home. We'll sort it out." Walking to his car felt like running a gauntlet. Eyes followed him, whispers cut through the air. He'd lost his job temporarily or permanently, didn't matter, because he dared to date someone whose money made him suspicious by association. The drive home took forever through rush hour traffic. His phone stayed off, but he knew Ezra would have questions. 7-year-olds heard things at school. Other kids had parents who read tabloids, who gossiped, who would fill their children's heads with narratives about daddy and the rich lady. Dorothy met him at his apartment door, face creased with worry. "Ezra's fine. But there were reporters at the school. The principal called me. I picked him up early. Inside, Ezra sat on the couch clutching his favorite stuffed dinosaur, eyes red from crying. Darius's heart shattered. Hey, little man, what happened? Kids at school said Miss Lillian is only pretending to like you because you're poor. They said rich people do that sometimes for fun. Darius pulled him close, rage and helplessness warring in his chest. His son shouldn't have to defend his father's relationship to children who repeated their parents' ugly assumptions. That's not true. Miss Lillian likes us for real. Promise. He wanted to promise, wanted to believe with the certainty Ezra needed, but doubt had crept in, poisonous and insidious. Why would a billionaire CEO want someone like him? What did he offer except complications and bad press? His phone powered back on, immediately flooded with notifications. Most were garbage reporters, strangers, people selling stories. But one caught his attention, Lillian Ashford calling. He stepped into his bedroom, closing the door before answering. Hello, Darius. Her voice cracked his name. I'm so sorry, the photos, the stories, this is my fault. It's nobody's fault. Just reality catching up. My board is using our relationship against me, claiming I'm distracted, unstable. They want me to step down. My boss suspended me, said I'm conflict of interest. Silence stretched between them, heavy with implications neither wanted to voice. This was the price of their connection, his job, her company, public humiliation for both. Maybe we should take a break. Her words came out strangled. Until things calm down. Is that what you want? No, but I don't want to drag you through my mess. What if I want to be dragged? The question hung in digital space, challenge and invitation. On the other end, Lillian stood at her penthouse window, city spread beneath her like chessboard where she'd always known the right moves. Until now. Why would you want this? The scrutiny, the judgment, Because for the first time in 3 years I feel alive, and I'm not giving that up without a fight. She closed her eyes, tears finally spilling over. He didn't know what he was asking, didn't understand the machine she'd built that would chew them both up if they didn't play by its rules. I have board vote Friday. They'll remove me if I don't end this. Then don't end it. Darius, I mean it. We fight, together, show them it's real. Real. The word tasted like hope and terror. Real meant vulnerability. Real meant risk. Real meant potentially losing everything for something that might not survive the pressure. My son is already paying the price. Kids at his school. I know, I'm sorry. So where does that leave us? Neither had answer. They stayed on the line anyway, breathing together across distance. Neither willing to hang up first because hanging up felt like ending something that had barely begun. Wednesday arrived with new crisis. Darius was making breakfast when someone knocked on his door with aggressive insistence. He checked the peephole, stomach sinking at the woman standing in the hallway. Simone looked different. Hair professionally styled, clothes, expensive, confidence radiating from her posture. 3 years had transformed her from the uncertain woman who'd left into someone who'd clearly found herself, or at least found money. We need to talk about Ezra. He let her in because refusing would only make things worse. She glanced around the apartment and he saw judgment flash across her face. Comparison being drawn between his modest space and whatever life she'd built. What about him? I want joint custody. The words detonated in the quiet morning. Ezra was still asleep, unaware his world was about to be contested. You left 3 years ago. You can't just walk back in. I was young. I wasn't ready. I am now. What changed? I got my life together. I'm remarried. Robert is a good man, lawyer, stable income. We can provide things you can't. The implication landed like punch. She'd seen the tabloids, knew about his suspension, knew he was vulnerable. Ezra has stability with me. Does he? I saw the news. You're dating a billionaire. How stable is that? How long before she gets bored and moves on and you're left picking up pieces while Ezra wonders why another woman disappeared from his life? Her words found every insecurity he'd been trying to ignore. She'd always known how to cut deep, how to find the soft spots and press until they bruised. I'm his mother. I have rights. You gave up those rights when you walked out. She pulled papers from her purse, setting them on his kitchen table. Legal documents, preliminary custody filing. My lawyer says I have a case, especially now with all this instability in your life. He stared at the papers, feeling his world tilt on axis. Fight for his son or fight for Lillian. Keep his head down or stand his ground. Choose safety or choose living. Get out. Darius, get out. You want custody, we'll do it in court, but you don't get to come into my home and threaten me. She left with a smile that said she'd already won. The door closed behind her and Darius sank into a chair, head in hands. Ezra appeared in the hallway, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Who was that? Nobody important, Ez. Go get dressed for school. But it wasn't nobody. It was the past coming back to destroy the future he'd barely started building. Thursday morning, Darius called Janelle Washington from the construction site parking lot. Voice barely steady. His oldest friend from college had become a family lawyer in Brooklyn, handling custody cases that broke hearts more often than they mended them. She filed preliminary papers, hearings scheduled 3 weeks out. Janelle's exhale carried weight through the phone line. Darius, she has standing. Not a strong case, but the publicity around your relationship with Lillian Ashford, it hurts you. Makes you look unstable, distracted. So what do? You either end the relationship before the hearing or you prove it's real and stable enough that it enhances Ezra's life instead of disrupting it. The choice laid out stark and simple. Safety or truth. Isolation or risk. Everything he'd learned in 3 years of single parenthood screamed at him to choose the path that protected his son. But Ezra's question from weeks ago echoed louder. Are you lonely, Daddy? How do I prove that? Live it. Integrate her into your routine. Document stability, family dinners, homework, help consistent presence, and pray the judge sees it as commitment instead of recklessness. He called Lillian that evening after Ezra fell asleep, finding her still at the office despite it being nearly midnight. The exhaustion in her voice matched his own bone-deep weariness. Simone filed for custody, the hearings in 3 weeks. Because of us? Partly. She's using the media attention, my suspension, everything, saying I'm exposing Ezra to unstable environment. Silence stretched between them, and he could hear her thinking, calculating, running scenarios the way she probably did in boardrooms. Then we end it. I won't let you lose your son because of me. That's not your decision to make. Darius, I need to know something first. Is this real? Are we real? Or was this just a nice escape for both of us? The question forced honesty neither could avoid. Lillian stood at her office window, looking down at Manhattan from a height that made people look like insects, and felt the weight of what he was actually asking. Not just about them, but about her capacity for anything genuine in a life she'd built on controlled variables and calculated risks. It started as escape, but it became real. Somewhere between the first night and meeting Ezra, it became the realest thing in my life. Then we fight. For us. I'm not letting fear decide this time. What about Ezra? Ezra likes you. He called you nice. For him, that's everything. They decided together, voices steadying as conviction replaced panic. Stay together. Fight both battles, custody and board. Prove the relationship deserved to exist despite every force trying to tear it apart. Friday's board vote loomed like execution date. Lillian spent Thursday night preparing her defense. Marshalling evidence of company performance, merger progress, shareholder returns. Every metric proved her leadership had strengthened, not weakened. But Gregory wasn't attacking her competence. He was attacking her focus, her priorities, the very human need for connection that made her vulnerable. The vote Friday afternoon was closer than expected: 6 board members for keeping her as CEO, 5 supporting Gregory's restructuring. They'd given her rope, but with conditions attached. No more distractions. Merger completion by quarter's end. 0 tolerance for further instability. Gregory remained as CFO, despite losing his power play, his position technically separate from the restructuring vote, though. She'd be watching him closely now. She left the building at 6 p.m. for the first time in months, heading to Queens instead of her penthouse. Darius met her at his door, pulling her inside before neighbors could start new rumors. Ezra ran from his bedroom, launching himself at her knees with the unself-conscious affection of children who hadn't learned to guard their hearts. "Miss Lillian, you came back." She knelt, letting him hug her properly, feeling the fierce grip of small arms around her neck. When had she last been hugged like this? When had anyone touched her without agenda? "Of course I came back. I promised, didn't I?" Dinner that night was chaotic in ways Lillian's life had never been. Spaghetti sauce splattered on the stove, garlic bread burned slightly around the edges, Ezra chattering about school while Darius tried to strain pasta and listen simultaneously. She found herself setting the table, pouring water, helping in small ways that felt enormous because no one had ever needed her help with anything this mundane. They ate squashed around the tiny table, elbows bumping, and Lillian took her first bite of genuinely imperfect food served with complete love. It tasted better than any Michelin-starred meal she'd consumed in isolation. "This is perfect," Ezra grinned, sauce on his chin. "Daddy says family dinners are important. Are you family now?" The question hung in the air, too large for easy answer. Darius and Lillian exchanged glances, whole conversations happening in silence. "I'd like to be, if that's okay with you." "It's okay with me. You're nice, and you don't get mad when I spill things." After dinner, after dishes, after Ezra's bath and bedtime story, Darius and Lillian finally had moment alone on his small balcony overlooking the neighborhood. The city hummed in the distance, but here life moved at slower pace. Families settled in for evening routines. Somewhere a dog barked. Television laughter drifted from open windows. "We have 3 weeks to build our case." "What does that mean?" "It means you come over, often. We create routine breakfast, sometimes dinner most nights. You help with homework. Attend his soccer game Saturday. Show the court that you're integrated into his life in healthy ways. Your place or mine." She meant it as joke, but it fell flat. "Lillian, I've never even seen where you live." The accusation underneath wasn't unfair. She'd let him expose every vulnerability while keeping her world carefully hidden. The penthouse represented everything she was afraid of him seeing: the excess, the isolation, the monument to success that felt more like mausoleum. "You're right. Tomorrow, come to my place for dinner, both of you." His eyebrows rose. "You sure? If we're doing this, really doing this, then no more hiding. You see all of it. Decide if you still want in." Saturday evening, Darius held Ezra's hand as they approached the building on Billionaire's Row. Its glass facade reflecting sunset in ways that made it look less like apartment building and more like monument to human ambition. The doorman assessed them both before Darius could even speak. "We're here to see Lillian Ashford." Recognition and surprise flashed across the man's face. "Of course. Ms. Ashford is expecting you, 42nd floor." The elevator was larger than Darius's bedroom, mirrored and marble rising so smoothly he barely felt the movement. Ezra pressed his face to the glass as the city fell away beneath them, skyscrapers becoming level with their ascent. "Daddy, we're really high." "Yeah, buddy, really high." The doors opened directly into her penthouse, no hallway, no neighbors, just immediate entrance to space so vast. Darius's first thought was that she must be incredibly lonely here. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed Manhattan spreading in all directions, thousands of lights creating constellation that made the actual stars irrelevant. But the apartment itself felt sterile, beautiful, and empty in equal measure. Lillian appeared from the kitchen wearing jeans and looking nervous in ways her boardroom armor never allowed. "You made it." Ezra's eyes were huge, taking in the space with 7-year-old wonder. "Miss Lillian, you live in the sky." "I do. Want to see the view." She led him to the windows, pointing out landmarks, while Darius stood in her living room trying to reconcile this space with the woman who'd sat on his apartment floor building Legos. This was her real-life helicopter pad on the roof. temperature control that never fluctuated, silence so complete it felt oppressive. Dinner was catered despite her claims of cooking served on china that probably cost more than his monthly rent. But she'd ordered pizza at Ezra's request, and watching her try to eat it with knife and fork before his son showed her the proper way to fold a slice made something in Darius's chest loosen. "Like this, Miss Lillian, you gotta fold it so the cheese doesn't slide off." She followed his demonstration, giggling when sauce dripped on her expensive jeans, and Darius saw glimpses of person underneath the CEO, someone who'd forgotten how to be messy, someone who needed permission to be imperfect. After dinner, Ezra discovered her sound system, immediately requesting to test its capabilities. Music filled the vast space, first pop songs he knew from school, then jazz, that Lillian admitted she listened to when working late. They ended up dancing, Ezra bouncing around with abandon while Lillian and Darius moved together, more carefully aware of their son's eyes tracking them. "This place is beautiful." His voice stayed low just for her. "It's lonely. I didn't realize how lonely until I saw your apartment. You have a home. I have a museum. So change it. It's not that simple. Isn't it? Put some pictures on the walls. Get furniture that's been sat on. Let it be lived in instead of displayed." The simplicity of his solution made her throat tighten. She'd spent years curating perfection, and he was suggesting she embrace mess. Except mess was where life actually happened: spilled milk and burned garlic bread and Lego pieces in uncomfortable places. The board's vote had given Lillian breathing room, but Gregory still posed a threat she couldn't ignore. The next 2 weeks became a delicate balance, maintaining professional excellence while building personal foundation strong enough to withstand custody scrutiny. Lillian found herself splitting time between office and Queen's mornings, starting with coffee at her place and evenings ending with bedtime stories at his. She helped Ezra with math homework, discovered she was actually good at explaining fractions through Lego-based examples. She attended his soccer game, cheering from the sidelines with other parents who eyed her with mix of curiosity and suspicion. Janelle coached Darius on testimony, running him through questions Simone's lawyer would likely ask. Each practice session revealed new vulnerabilities. His inconsistent income, the small apartment, his own admission that dating a billionaire created complications. "They're going to paint you as distracted by her money or dazzled by her world. You need to show the judge that your relationship with Lillian enhances Ezra's stability, not threatens it." "How do I prove that?" "By showing her consistent presence, the routine you've built, the way she fits into his life naturally instead of disrupting it." The Tuesday before Thursday's custody hearing, Lillian worked late, tracing inconsistencies in quarterly financial reports. Numbers that didn't align with projections Gregory had presented months ago. She spent 18 hours following the trail: offshore accounts, falsified vendor payments, systematic embezzlement running back 6 months. Gregory Vaughn wasn't just trying to take her position. He was looting the company while destabilizing her leadership to cover his tracks. Wednesday morning, she called emergency board meeting. The evidence sat before them: transaction records proving conspiracy, email trails documenting Gregory's systematic theft of company funds to offshore accounts, testimony from vendors who'd been pressured to inflate invoices in exchange for kickbacks. "You've been embezzling for 6 months while undermining my leadership to distract from your crimes." The board's shock rippled through the room like earthquake. Gregory's confident mask shattered as forensic accountants presented documentation that would hold up in criminal court. "These accusations are documented, provable, criminal." Lillian's voice cut through his denials like surgical blade. "You have 2 choices. Resign immediately and cooperate with our investigation, or we press charges today and let prosecutors handle it." By noon, Gregory had been escorted from the building by security resignation, forced to avoid immediate prosecution that would come anyway once she turned evidence over to federal authorities. The board, chastened and apologetic, offered renewed support. The merger threatened by Gregory's manipulations could now proceed cleanly. She should have felt victorious. Instead, she felt exhausted. This was the world she'd built: corporate intrigue and betrayal, people willing to destroy others for power and money. No wonder she'd been eating dinner alone for years. Who could trust anyone in an environment this toxic? Her phone rang as she left the building Wednesday evening. Darius calling from his apartment where she was supposed to be for dinner. "Where are you? Ezra made you a card." The simple question, the assumption that she'd show up because she'd promised to the knowledge that a 7-year-old had spent time making her something, it broke through the shell she'd been maintaining since the board meeting. "I'm coming. I need to see you." "What happened?" "I'll tell you when I get there, but Darius, thank you for assuming I'd come. Thank you for expecting me to keep my word." His voice softened. "I know who you are. I've always known." The custody hearing Thursday morning brought everyone into courtroom that felt too small for the lives being decided within its walls. Simone arrived with Robert, her husband lawyer, lending credibility through his presence alone. She'd dressed carefully conservative but carrying the image of reformed motherhood. Her lawyer, a woman named Patricia Hendricks with steel gray hair and reputation for winning, laid out their case with surgical precision. "Ms. Simone Whitmore made mistake 3 years ago, leaving when she wasn't emotionally prepared for motherhood. She spent the intervening years building stability, career, marriage therapy. She's ready now to be the mother Ezra deserves." Darius sat with Janelle at the opposite table, Lillian in the gallery behind them. The judge, an older black woman named Constance Murray, studied all parties with eyes that had seen every variation of family dysfunction over 30 years on the bench. Simone's testimony came first, carefully rehearsed to hit every emotional note. She cried when describing how young and overwhelmed she'd been, smiled when talking about therapy breakthroughs that helped her understand her failures, projected confidence when explaining the stable home she could now provide. "I've changed, grown. I'm ready to be Ezra's mother in ways I couldn't be before." Patricia Hendricks then pivoted to attack. "Mr. Whitmore is good father, no one disputes that. But recent developments raise concerns about his judgment and priorities." She produced the tabloid photos, the headlines, documentation of Darius's suspension from work. Each piece of evidence painted picture of man distracted by relationship that belonged to different world than his son's reality. Mr. Whitmore's involvement with Billionaire CEO Lillian Ashford has brought media scrutiny, public attention, and instability into Ezra's life. Children at school tease him. Reporters have shown up at school pickup. Is this the environment we want for a 7-year-old? Darius's jaw clenched, but Janelle's hand on his arm kept him seated. Furthermore, Mr. Whitmore has been suspended from his job due to conflict of interest concerns. His financial stability, already tenuous compared to what Ms. Whitmore can provide, has been further compromised. The implication hung in the courtroom air. Maybe Darius was dating Lillian for money after all. Maybe his judgment was compromised by a possibility of easier life than construction work could provide. Judge Murray called recess before Darius's testimony, giving everyone chance to regroup. Lillian found him in the hallway, pulled him into empty consultation room. "That was brutal. I'm sorry." "Not your fault." "It is, though. Every word she said is because of me. Because I'm who I am." His hands framed her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You're who you are. Successful, brilliant kind. I'm not ashamed of that. I won't let them make me ashamed." The afternoon session began with Darius's testimony. Janelle walked him through his history with Ezra, 3 years of solo parenting, perfect attendance at school events, medical appointments, never missed homework, help every evening. Then came the questions about Lillian. "Mr. Whitmore, how long have you known Ms. Ashford?" 3 weeks. Patricia Hendricks pounced. 3 weeks and you're already integrating her into your son's life. Isn't that reckless? "We've known each other 3 weeks. But in those 3 weeks, she's been more present than most people I've known for years." "Present how?" "Family dinners, homework help. She came to Ezra's soccer game. She fits into our life instead of disrupting it. But she's a billionaire CEO. Her world is completely different from yours. How can that not be disruptive?" Darius took breath, centering himself in truth instead of defense. "Her world is different, but she doesn't treat me or Ezra differently because of it. She sits on our floor building Legos. She eats burned spaghetti at our tiny table. She asked my son to teach her how to fold a pizza slice. Some faces in the courtroom softened. Others remained skeptical. Your Honor, may I continue? Patricia wasn't finished destroying him. Mr. Whitmore, you were recently suspended from your job. Can you explain that? My employer claimed conflict of interest because Lillian's company might bid on future projects. It's administrative temporary. But it's left you without income for 2 weeks and counting. How is that stable? I have savings, and I'll be back to work soon. Will you, or will you become financially dependent on Ms. Ashford? Is that the lesson you want your son to learn, that you can date your way out of working-class life? Rage flashed hot through Darius's veins, but he kept his voice level. I would never take money from Lillian for anything except what I earn. I'm dating her because she makes me want to be a better version of myself. Because my son sees me happy for first time in 3 years. Because she reminds me that being a good father doesn't mean forgetting I'm also a man who deserves connection. The courtroom fell silent. Even Patricia Hendricks seemed momentarily caught off guard by the raw honesty. Judge Murray leaned forward. Mr. Whitmore, is this relationship serious enough that Ms. Ashford would testify on your behalf? He hadn't expected that question. Glanced back at Lillian, saw her nod slightly. Yes, Your Honor. Then I'd like to hear from her. Lillian hadn't prepared for this. Janelle whispered quick instructions about swearing in, about keeping answers concise, about not volunteering information. But when Lillian took the stand and met Judge Murray's assessing gaze, all the boardroom tactics she'd mastered for years evaporated. Ms. Ashford, you've known Mr. Whitmore for 3 weeks. What is your intention with this family? The question cut straight to the heart. No room for evasion or corporate speak, just honest answer about messy human connection. To be part of it, if they'll have me. You have substantial wealth. How does that affect your relationship? It doesn't. Darius won't let it. He's the most principled man I've ever met. He refused money for Ezra's college fund, refused help with bills, refused every offer I've made that might compromise his independence. Why? Because he understands that taking money changes power dynamics. He wants us to be equals, not benefactor and dependent. I respect that more than I can express. And Ezra, you've known him for 3 weeks. What makes you think you understand what's best for him? Lillian's throat tightened. This was the question that mattered, the one that would determine if she was intrusion or addition. I don't presume to know what's best for him, but I know what I see. I see a child who's happy, secure, loved completely by his father. I'm not trying to replace anyone, I'm just trying to be someone Ezra can count on. Patricia Hendricks stood. Ms. Ashford, you've known this child 3 weeks. You presume to understand his needs better than his mother? No. I presume to support what his father knows is best. Darius has been Ezra's constant for 3 years. He's earned the right to make decisions about his son's welfare. Have you considered what happens when this relationship ends? When you tire of playing family with people whose lives are nothing like yours? The attack was designed to shake her, to expose her as dilettante, playing with real people's lives. But Lillian had faced hostile board members, aggressive investors, reporters trying to destroy her reputation. Patricia Hendricks was formidable, but she didn't scare someone who'd built empire from nothing. I don't know the future. I know we could fail. I know the odds are against us. She looked at Darius, then Ezra sitting in the gallery with Dorothy. But showing up even when it's hard, that's what love actually looks like. Not the fairy tale version. The kind that chooses to stay when leaving would be easier. The courtroom fell silent. Judge Murray studied Lillian for a long moment, then made note on her pad. I'd like to speak with Ezra privately. The bailiff brought him to the judge's chambers, small hand in larger one, eyes wide with nervousness. When he emerged 20 minutes later, his face was unreadable. Children learned early how to hide what adults wanted to see. Judge Murray reconvened court, her expression giving nothing away. She looked at all parties, Simone crying quietly in her seat. Darius rigid with tension, Lillian's hands clasped so tight her knuckles had gone white. This court takes custody matters seriously. Children deserve stability, love, and caregivers who put their needs first. She paused, letting the weight settle. Ms. Simone Whitmore, you have right to rebuild relationship with your son. However, primary custody requires demonstrated stability over time, not just intentions. Hope flickered in Simone's face, then died as the judge continued. Mr. Whitmore has been Ezra's sole parent for 3 years. He's never missed a school event, medical appointment, or bedtime. His recent relationship, while unorthodox, does not constitute instability. Darius's breath caught. I'm granting primary custody to Mr. Whitmore. Ms. Whitmore will have supervised visitation 1 weekend per month, increasing to unsupervised after 6 months of consistent attendance and completion of parenting classes. We'll review the arrangement in 1 year. The gavel came down final and absolute. Darius's legs nearly gave out. Janelle grabbed his arm, steadying him while relief flooded through his system in waves that made him dizzy. Simone's face crumpled. Robert held her as she sobbed, and despite everything, Darius felt sympathy. She'd lost again, and losing hurt regardless of whether the outcome was deserved. Outside the courthouse, Lillian and Darius stood on the steps while Ezra ran ahead with Dorothy, energy too big to contain after hours of forced stillness. We did it. You did it. I just showed up. You showed up when it mattered. He pulled her close, not caring about the photographers probably capturing this moment for tomorrow's papers. Showing up even when it's hard, that's what love actually looks like. The words hung between them, first time either had said the word out loud in this context. Love, dangerous and essential, and somehow exactly right despite every rational reason it shouldn't be. I love you too, in case that wasn't clear. 6 months later, December arrived with cold that made Queens feel even smaller, more intimate. Lillian had transitioned to board chairman by choice, stepping back from daily operations to focus on strategic guidance. The company thrived under new CEO she'd selected, stock price up 25%, merger completed successfully. Gregory faced criminal charges that would likely send him to prison for years. She'd sold the penthouse-bought townhouse in Queens, 10 blocks from Darius's apartment. Still nice, she couldn't quite embrace full working-class aesthetic, but lived in ways her old place never was. Pictures on walls, furniture that showed wear, kitchen that actually smelled like cooking sometimes. They hadn't moved in together yet. Too fast, too much pressure on Ezra, who was still adjusting to having his mother back in his life twice monthly. But Lillian stayed over most nights, had her own drawer in Darius's dresser, kept spare toothbrush in his bathroom. Simone's visits had settled into routine. She showed up when scheduled, followed the rules, engaged with therapy Judge Murray had mandated. The relationship with Ezra was rebuilding, slowly, scarred but healing. Christmas Eve found them at Darius's apartment, tree crammed into corner of the living room, Ezra having decorated it with enthusiasm that exceeded aesthetic judgment. Ornaments clustered in bottom third, lights tangled in spots but perfect in the way things made with love always were. Lillian helped Ezra make cookies for Santa, burning the first batch because neither of them had mastered the timing yet. Darius watched from the couch, smiling in the way he smiled now, easy, frequent, genuine. After Ezra fell asleep, they sat together on the small balcony despite the cold, wrapped in blankets, watching the neighborhood settle into holiday peace. I have something for you. Darius pulled small box from his pocket. Not ring-sized, not proposal, but carefully chosen and wrapped. Inside was a key. Simple brass, newly cut, attached to keychain engraved with their address. I know we said we'd take it slow, but Ezra and we want you here. Really here. She turned the key over in her palm, feeling its weight. Not marriage. Not yet. Just your place in our world. Yes. The word came without hesitation. God, yes. From the bedroom came small voice. Did she say yes to the key? They both laughed. You're supposed to be asleep. Ezra padded out in dinosaur pajamas, clutching paper. I wanted to make sure she said yes before I gave her my present. The drawing showed three stick figures holding hands, Daddy Ezra and Miss Lillian. This time Lillian wasn't in the corner, she was right in the middle. My family. 2 years later, they returned to Chez Laurent for anniversary dinner, now married with daughter on the way. The host greeted them warmly, regulars who'd earned their place in this world that once felt foreign. Over wine for him, sparkling water for her, they talked about nursery plans and Ezra's upcoming birthday. The city moved around them, but their small circle held steady. Do you ever think about that night if Sarah L. had actually shown up? Thank God she didn't. They walked home to their house in Queens, the one they'd chosen together. Dorothy's car sat out front, babysitting duty. Inside, Ezra slept peacefully, room cluttered with evidence of childhood well lived. Darius wrapped arms around Lillian from behind, hands settling on her pregnant belly. You okay? More than okay. They stood in doorway of their son's room, their daughter moving between them, their lives intertwined in ways that had seemed impossible 3 years ago. Sometimes the best things really do happen when plans fall apart.